Well, I'm joined now by the Israeli government spokesperson, David Mencer. Thanks for being with us. So let's just talk about this, because there's so much wrong, so much disputed here. Why do you not allow an independent investigation into this?
Good evening, Mark. Good to be with you. Let me just start off by saying that Hamas has a long record of misusing ambulances. They don't just hijack ambulances, they actually hijack the very idea of the emergency services and also humanitarian aid. It's not the first time.
I just want to, look, I accept what you're saying. Let's just concentrate, if we can, on this whole idea of an independent investigation, because your initial story has fallen apart once. It's been shown to be misleading. So I just wonder, why no independent investigation? I know the IDF are investigating, but why no independent investigation? What are you afraid of?
Israel's not afraid of anything. It's not the first time that Hamas has used ambulances to smuggle terrorists. It's a matter of public record. It's been confirmed by Hamas themselves when we've captured them, who told the world that they use ambulances to transport their own terrorists. It's been confirmed repeatedly over the years, not only by Israeli sources, but by Gaza's ambulance drivers themselves, by Gaza's hospital directors, in a statement by President Mahmoud Abbas, no less, by Egyptian news investigators, and by Hamas operatives themselves.
But in this incident,
when we've intercepted
let's just stay with this incident. What evidence do you have that there were 6 Hamas fighters in these ambulances?
So our investigation is taking place right now. It's going to be very thorough. It will be coming out very, very shortly. We have nothing to hide whatsoever, and the thorough investigation, the results of which should come out very, very shortly. But whatever happens,
can I just ask you another particular question? Do you have evidence that they identified them as Hamas before they opened fire or after they opened fire?
I will answer that question, but I must tell you, firstly, that emergency vehicles should be used to save lives. Hamas has turned them into getaway cars for killers. While our soldiers doesn't mean you can shoot at every ambulance. I'm just trying to get to the heart of this question. You said you'd answer it. Were they identified as Hamas, these 6 Hamas you've identified? Were they identified before these troops opened fire or after? So that's why Hamas themselves use ambulances to hide their identity.
Right.
While
so
our soldiers,
So it was after.
No, while our soldiers stake out Hamas terror squads, Hamas hides behind civilians and then cries foul when terrorists are targeted. Let me be clear. This incident happened. Let's be clear on this war zone.
Let's just be clear on this question. Were they identified before? Were they identified before or after?
Among those killed were 6 Hamas terrorists. That is not speculation. It is confirmation. The IDF is investigating the incident in Rafah thoroughly, transparently, and in real time. Hamas, on the other hand, investigates nothing, admits nothing, and abuses everything. No army in the world does more to avoid civilian casualties than the IDF. And
some other questions. Why did
civilians more than Hamas?
Why did they hide I mean, there are so many questions here. Why did they hide the bodies? Why did they try to hide the ambulances? These are all questions, by the way, that many international organisations, it's not Hamas I'm echoing here, it's the UN Secretary General, it's the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the head of the UN Humanitarian Affairs Office, Tom Fletcher, it's the Red Cross, numerous governments, all saying it's unacceptable, all calling for an independent inquiry. So why not?
Mark, Israel doesn't fear the truth. That's why we are investigating this incident extremely thoroughly. Can Hamas say the same? Hamas violates every principle of international law. They hide in hospitals, in mosques, in schools, and then they blame us when war crimes blow up in their own faces. So I can tell you again that the IDF soldiers opened fire from a distance at vehicles that were moving suspiciously in their direction. Among the dead were 6 Hamas terrorists, Mark. What were Hamas terrorists doing in an ambulance convoy?
So they were identified as Hamas terrorists after the event. Another question I have.
Well, let me answer that question, because that will be dealt with in the results of the investigation, which will be out shortly. This incident was reported in real time to UN officials. The IDF is conducting that investigation into the circumstances of this incident, which took place a couple of weeks ago. But unfortunately, the Hamas terror organization systematically violates international law. They started this war by taking over civilian facilities and infrastructure, including hospitals, schools, and mosques.
Right, you've made that point.
And they are cruelly exploiting and placing their own civilian population
just one
at
other,
risk.
I'm just trying to get through these questions. One other specific question on this incident. The claim is that it was in a combat zone. The Israelis claim it was in a combat zone, when our own data investigation shows that that was not the case. Can you just clear that one up?
So there's nothing I'm going to say that is going to prejudice this investigation. The results will come out shortly. It's a thorough investigation by the IDF.
But it's the military investigating the military, isn't it?
No, it's the independent
really
arm.
wash with...
It's the same that Britain would do if they were investigating something which the British armed forces were accused of doing. We are fighting in a complex war zone. Hamas hide amongst civilians. They hide amongst ambulances. This is not my words. These are the words of Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian leader themselves.
Isn't there a pattern here that your government does not welcome outside scrutiny, hence no independent investigation?
The pattern here is Hamas, which started this war, which won't release our hostages, which won't surrender, which are continuing to subject their own people to act as human shields. We, on the other hand, Israel, are trying our hardest to move civilians out of harm's way in an extremely complex war zone being run by jihadis.
My question was about scrutiny. Let's just have a look. 2 UK MPs travelling to witness firsthand the situation in the West Bank refused permission to enter Israel. Journalists who want to go into Gaza to report the situation there refuse permission into Gaza. Israel does not want to be scrutinised.
This is the only free democracy with press freedom in hundreds of miles in any direction. When you're talking about those members of parliament, Israel has laws. We are run by laws.
But what is the law? What is the law that prevents two MPs from a friendly democracy coming to see what's going on in Israel? What's the law that prevents that?
I will tell you. I will share that with you. These individuals were working against our state and our citizens because they are promoting calls for its boycott. And they accuse this country with false allegations.
But hang on a second, that's a political... I mean, one had organised a letter calling for a ban on exports from West Bank settlements. Another had been very critical of the blocking of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Are these not legitimate political positions in a democracy?
The legitimate position would be for these two members of parliament to contact the Israeli embassy in London, to say that is the purpose of their visit.
Well,
that
the British
is
government
normal protocol. That is normal. Listen to me, Mark. There's no point interrupting me. Otherwise, what's the point of this interview?
Well, we're tight for time.
This is an interview with me. Let me give you the answers. Yeah, so on Saturday, in accordance with the law, these two members of parliament were denied entry into Israel by our Minister of the Interior. This is precisely the same actions that UK has done by stopping our members of parliament visiting the UK. These individuals had accused Israel of false crimes, were actively involved in promoting sanctions against our people, and that is why it is against our law to allow people into the country that wish to boycott this country, because boycotting this country essentially means that you do not wish Israel to exist.
But they were travelling
my friends,
in good... They say they were travelling in good faith.
You, Mark, but Israel does exist.
I'm just going to tell you what they say.
And we will defend ourselves. We will always defend ourselves. We will defend our
two Labour
families.
MPs.
We will grow this country. We will succeed and will be a light unto the nations because this country is a democracy and we will defend our values. And just because you may have succumbed to this woke Islamist ideology, we in here in Israel have not.
That's absolute nonsense. That is nonsense. I'm asking you a question. Why don't we be grown up about this? I'll ask the questions, you answer them.
These two members of parliament chose not to exercise their right under Israeli law to petition our court to reconsider, which is more than the right which was given to our members of parliament when they tried to visit the UK but were denied entry. They weren't allowed to appeal it. They were offered hotel accommodation by the Israeli taxpayer, which they declined. In addition, the cost of their flight back to the UK was covered by the State of Israel. So the UK is an ally, a very important ally. We have many shared values, but this visit was intended to provoke anti-Israel activity, and no self-respecting country would allow those sorts of people to visit this country.
They deny that it was anyway intended to be provocative. Let me ask you a last question. The Secretary General of the UN, Guterres, has just been talking at the UN. He said Gaza is a killing field. The UN capacity to deliver aid in Gaza has been strangled. Israel is not fulfilling its unequivocal obligations as the occupying power under international law. Just finally, your reaction to that.
So it's Hamas that are stealing the aid. 1.8 million tons of aid have gone into Gaza, enough to fill Wembley Stadium 80 times, not just the grass, but to the brim. And in 42 days during the ceasefire, there were 25,000 aid trucks which went into Gaza. There's no shortage of food in Gaza. The only ones truly starving are our hostages. Why do I say that? Because that's what they looked like. They looked like concentration camp victims when they were finally released. They've been chained, they've been hidden, they've been tortured in Hamas tunnels. So let's be clear, no one in Hamas is hungry. And when they released our emaciated hostages, they looked in the most appalling state. So our decision to halt aid entry into Gaza is consistent with international law. I'll tell you which article specifically. It's Article 23.
Many people are calling it collective punishment.
So let me give you the practicalities of the law, not what many people say on Twitter or whatever. Article 23 of the Fourth Geneva Convention very clearly states that a country is not required to allow aid if it will be diverted to enemy combatants. Despite allowing large-scale aid transfers, Israel and international bodies, including the UN themselves...
But under international law, it is your obligation to look after a civilian population.
Not if the aid is being diverted to the terrorist organization.
That is absolutely clear.
No, the UN have actually documented Hamas's systematic theft and weaponization of humanitarian supplies. So given that aid has been used to sustain Hamas's military operation, including actually the October the 7th massacre and the ongoing hostilities, Israel is under no legal obligation whatsoever to continue these transfers. If we want to open the borders, they should release our hostages and lay down their arms.
But then, just a final point then.
This war is over.
What is the incentive for Hamas to release the hostages? It is the only bargaining power they have now. You're bombing again in Gaza. What is the incentive for them to release the hostages in the current circumstances?
Hamas are a terrorist organization, and this is a democracy led by a prime minister, which literally wrote the book on counterterrorism. Our prime minister is a world expert on counterterrorism. So you will excuse me if perhaps bowing to the knowledge of our government when we say that this war will be over when Hamas, who instituted the worst day of Jew killing since the Holocaust, are destroyed, their governing and military capability eviscerated, all of our hostages are released, and finally that Gaza does not become a threat to Israel. And people that care about Gazans should want Hamas to leave the Strip so that a better future can begin for all of the people in this region.
So much to talk about. David Mencer, thank you for coming on. Thank you.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Right, let's go straight to our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who was listening in to all that. So, Alistair, there is a good deal of concern about this incident involving the medics, and I know you've been asking questions of the Israeli government over the last few days. What did you make of that?
Well, look, let me start by giving David Mencer some credit. I mean, he is, to my knowledge at least, the only member of the Israeli government, or at least a spokesperson for the Israeli government or the Israeli military, to have faced questions publicly on this incident that took place in late March, 23rd of March. We haven't heard publicly we haven't been able to scrutinise anybody from the IDF. But there are, Mark, as you put to him, many questions about what happened. Who was to blame, if anyone was to blame. And, repeatedly, David Mencer has refused to answer those questions and instead has been resorting to a tactic of speaking more generally about Hamas tactics, about Hamas's use of emergency vehicles throughout the war in Gaza and beforehand to cover their movements. Now, that might be true. I mean, I would point out, actually, earlier this year, the IDF were seen going into Nablus, a Palestinian town in the West Bank, in an ambulance disguised as a Palestinian ambulance in order to carry out a raid. So it is a tactic that's been used by the Israelis as well. I mean, I would make that clear. But the point, as you try to press, is about what happened in this particular incident. And we're not getting many answers to that, except that video that came out, released, first broadcast by the New York Times, that sort of really blew the IDF's justification apart for many days. They say that 6 of the dead were Hamas fighters. Well, they still haven't proven that. They have not released any evidence. Maybe they were, but they haven't released any evidence. And even if they were, even if 6 of the 15 were Hamas fighters, well, 9 of them weren't, which is 60% of the dead were therefore, even in the IDF's calculation, innocent. As you say, no independent investigation as it stands at the moment. Why were they buried? Why did they bury the bodies? Why did they destroy the ambulances? All these questions we are waiting answers for. I think the only thing that David Mencer sort of told us, in terms of concrete terms, is that the results will be released soon. Well, we will have to wait and see whether those results of that investigation do answer the many questions.
OK, Alistair, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you.